Good morning and welcome back. Some quick headlines now, starting with this. Facial recognition technology will be highlighted on Capitol Hill today. A congressional committee holding a hearing on the issue after a government report found accuracy problems with the tool, which critics say could lead to bias. Supporters claim it's important for law enforcement. DHS uses facial recognition at airports on travelers entering and leaving the U.S. 3 astronauts are back on Earth this morning, including a brand new record holder. Astronaut Christina Koch spent 328 days on the International Space Station. That's the longest single space flight by a woman. And the name for newly minted U.S. Space Force members is still up in the air. The Pentagon says they are asking members what they would like to be called, but they definitely won't be called spacemen. The newest branch of the armed forces already has 16,000 members. Brian.
All right, thank you very much. We'll stay on that story. Meanwhile, the outbreak of the deadly coronavirus worsening overnight. Authorities confirming over 28,000 cases worldwide, with deaths surpassing 560. Now, right now, 2 cruise ships near Hong Kong and Japan are being quarantined, and a newborn baby now testing positive just 30 hours after birth in the epicenter of the outbreak. Here to react is Amish Lazaj, who specializes in infectious diseases. First off, doctor, do you believe that we're getting closer to some type of vaccine, because there are reports of some early success?
We are getting closer to what we would call a proof of concept, so a vaccine that can move quickly into clinical trials. But you have to remember that it's not just about making a candidate vaccine. It's also about scaling up production, doing safety and efficacy trials. So while we may see this going into humans in trials in the next couple of months, it's probably not going to be ready at a commercial scale for at least over a year. This is a long process.
So with this baby being testing now positive for the virus, how is that unique?
It's actually not very unique. We know that children are very susceptible to infections, especially from their mother, especially when they're newborns and don't have much immunity. And we know that the interactions between a baby and a mother, for example, if the mother is infected or the caregivers, is very intimate, and there's a lot of chance for transmission. So I don't think this really changes the trajectory. We know that anybody can be susceptible to this virus, including newborns.
You also say that quarantines really don't work.
When you're talking about an infectious disease like this that's spread through the respiratory route, that has efficient human-to-human transmission, that likely was spreading in China for weeks before it was actually noticed, the quarantines really are not going to have a measurable impact. The case counts are still going to go up, and that's not really how you can control a respiratory illness. It's not going to be something that can be contained. We really need to move from that strategy to preparing our healthcare systems to deal with what will likely be a mild pandemic.
So now we understand here at home, 350 Americans have arrived back home from China, now under a 2-week quarantine. We'll have a chance to see if they did test positive, if they do test positive in that time. When they get done with their 2 weeks, and if they come out clean, should we feel as though they're out of the woods?
Yes, I do think we should feel we're out of the woods. Most people's incubation period is only about 6 days, so 14 is kind of the upper limit. And these people are being tested routinely, being monitored. So I do think if they get through that, there's likely no chance that they're going to pick it up from. They're not carrying it. But we have to worry about community spread in the United States, because I think this is going to come here, irrespective of what we do, based on its transmission characteristics.
How important is it for our countries, especially the major countries, to start communicating with each other so we all get on the same page? A Manhattan Project for the globe.
I do think this is something that's long overdue. We've always faced a threat from infectious diseases, and I think since 2001 or so, after the anthrax attacks, we've gotten much better at dealing with infectious disease emergency. But what we really do need is a really coordinated approach to many different threats that are out there, so that we can actually take these threats off the table and go after them one by one and remove things like, for example, coronaviruses, which we've been worried about since 2003 and SARS, remove them from the list of targets that we need to go after, because they're going to continually be new ones, and we need to have a coordinated approach that goes after them one by one and makes the country much more resilient.
Last question. We know about vaccines, but we know about cures. So if I get it, is there something, a Tamiflu on steroids that will allow me to survive?
There are 2 drugs that are being tried in clinical trials. One is an HIV drug that's being repurposed, that there's some evidence behind it, at least anecdotal, but that's being done in a clinical trial. And then there's an experimental drug called remdesivir that's being used in what's called compassionate use, where they're using it experimentally under certain conditions, and they're going to do a clinical trial to figure that out. So we do have some antiviral compounds that are on the way that may be beneficial, but we need to study them appropriately.
Dr. Adaya, thanks so much.
Thanks.
Straight ahead, Tim Scott, Pam Bondi, Newt Gingrich, and so much more. There they are.